So thank you for the kind introduction and also for the organizers. It's great, really, to be able to join in. Also, the people who made the videos available via Zoom. I tried to catch up on some of the discussions. I read all the abstracts before, so I should have an idea of what has already been said by now. And yesterday, Sasha and Nina took you to Norway. Today, we're going to Denmark, to the hometown of Hans Christian Andersen in Odense. I'm sitting up here in this lovely former convent, and someday I hope to invite you for a conference in the coming years on these topics, because they're very much also being debated here in Denmark and in Scandinavia. I would also have loved to meet you in person, but sorry, the circumstances didn't allow for it this time. But you have the perfect, I wouldn't even say surrogate, but the one who really knows about the Andersen edition is with you, namely Magdalena Turska. So if you want to know the details of it, just ask Magdalena. Okay, let's see. Yes. I couldn't join in person, but I did try to help Agnieszka and the other organizers to get in touch with the Ibsen edition, because I think it's really important here that the Nordic scholarly community gets connected to the wider DSE community. And you just heard the presentation of the Swiss project, and I also helped Jan and Elena when they wanted some participants from Scandinavia earlier this year for the very good big DSE meetup in Basel. I can also recommend you to visit the website, click on the link. It has some great abstracts and slides for those who want to dig in with some of the aspects. So check it out. And here's a picture from the Basel conference that I couldn't attend. Sorry, Zurich. I'm mixing up lovely Swiss towns. The Zurich conference. It is very important that we meet and exchange ideas about the best practice and how to establish some of the infrastructures that provide the long-term support for the work that we're doing. The presentation here on Chaucer said, well, how many people are actually using the DSEs? And if you look at it on a year basis, well, it's not so much. But I think the perspective to take here is really the questions of decades. This is some of the work that we still pull down from the shelf that has been published 80 years ago, maybe the Ruthenian songs from the 19th century. This is the real impact of a scholarly edition. So the Nordic editors have for many years been meeting in their own circles, and there are at least two likely communities. I'll talk mostly about the second community that's still gray, but of course I do have to mention the Vikings. Well, I can't call them Vikings according to my colleagues. The correct term is of course Norse. And this Norse vernacular text tradition ranges from the end of the Viking Age until the invention of bookprint. And as you see also with the year 1772, these texts, sagas, and texts from related genres have been published in print now for more than 250 years ago. 4 years ago, the first digital scholarly edition went online at the a.ku.dk address. And the A over here stands for Árni Magnússon, the man with the wig over here. He was the one who collected this treasure trove of manuscripts. And the red triangle is meant to indicate that most of this research takes place in the western part of Scandinavia. Now, you know that Nina works on the period that I'm also engaged in, those who edit literary works published from the 18th through to the 20th century. So Danish countries are small in terms of population, and philology is not in very high esteem. In order to have any community worth the mention, a group of scholars then 30 years ago founded the Nordic Network for Edition Philology. You'll have the link over there. This network unites people from the Nordic language group. What I mean by language group is effectively that Finland is left out. This is important because the Finnish speakers do really have some very interesting work going on. So we'll have to invite them for a future meeting to see what the Nokia Nation is up to, for those who know what a Nokia is. Okay, so in the subtitle of my presentation here, I have highlighted two elements. The Nordic we've already heard about, but the caveat here is that the NNE community is inspiring, it truly is, but it can't really offer the best case for any DSE framework. In the closing discussion, I would rather like to explain what went wrong in Scandinavia with regards to technology. And as you've heard in the other presentations, it's nice to see best practice, but you learn at least as much, if not more, from instructive failures. So maybe we'll have a bit of Nordic noir at the end, some crime story to round up with. That being said, it wouldn't be an Andersen tale if I left out the bright sides, namely the European approaches. Seen from Scandinavia, the things going on towards the south have some light at the end of the tunnel. There are many good frameworks and infrastructures that are being established here. And I also look forward to the digital philology hub from Italy. Mi sembra molto interessante. Sono piena di suspenso. So when I read through your abstracts, I realized that several of my 5 points have by now already been made. So I boiled them down to the 2 basic points that might bring the discussion a bit forward here at the conference. I already mentioned the instructive failures at point 2. And I've added a question that might be relevant to consider in Poland, namely the questions whether national infrastructures for DSEs are doomed to fail from the outset. Is this the right level? Maybe not. Maybe either go transnational or stick to the local institutional approach. That is one of the things I think we might consider. My other point is managing diversity. I do love the bottom-up spirit of community practice. I try to engage in this myself. But as we just heard from Switzerland, at a fundamental technical level, you should try to stick to some sort of shared platform or work with some of the tools that promise to be available around for several years to come, or at least to have some sort of sustainable static website version. So if you do this platform sharing, you have to have a platform then that can be reconfigured and that can cater for different types of DSEs. Let me explain this in another manner. So in the humanities, we consider diversity to be a positive word. We have varying traditions of editing text. We acknowledge that and celebrate the rich source materials that do vary very significantly. But from the perspective of IT operations, diversity is an added cost, which is per se negative. So if you develop a new platform, as Wolfgang was saying, if you invent the wheel anew, just for your own particular DSE, you increase cost, both in terms of development and in terms of the long-term sustainment. So what does it look like here in Odense? Well, we have 4 digital editions. Not all of them are scholarly, but they're still quite diverse. On the left side here, we have a set of resources running on an SQL or SQL database. There are 3 bibliographies, and then there is a collection of letters that exceeds 13,000. So it's a kind of a correspondence edition. Then, when I joined the center, I decided to switch to TEI Publisher, and I think I'm the third or fourth presenter to be doing this, which is important also. And the first thing that went online is probably the one that I would actually recommend you to read for fun, especially if you have kids. It's worth the read. It should also display well on the smartphone. All you have to do is either go to this address or visit the one on the right, which is not the English translation only, but also the collected works of Andersen. So in the last 18 months, I've been assisting colleagues and retro-digitizing print edition that's 20 years old, which is then going to be available actually on Wednesday. So I still have some work to do. Sorry for the sloppy slides. This also might be interesting for the poetry collection with Andersen's poems and the drama corpus. There's also some stuff there for you. In terms of the workflow, worth a mention is that we modernized the orthography in a semi-automatic manner with a rule-based approach. You don't always have to use generative AI in order to speed up things. I'd be happy to share our experiences. The editors actually enjoyed that part. They didn't get ChatGPT angst while doing the work. And it helps to speed up things. Now, today, what is of most interest is here on the fourth column, namely the manuscript edition. I'm going to talk more about that. But the point here of presenting 4 editions together is that they have quite diverse ambitions. But the fact that this, strictly speaking, the English translation is not scholarly at all, at least not on the surface, that doesn't mean that they can't run on the same platform. And in terms of operations, I would actually like to migrate these databases from SQL to XGDB just in order to reduce the costs. If you're interested, we can also talk about why I added WordPress to the mix here. It's also maybe instructive in terms of what is your technical skill level for the end users who are providing content to the setup. So, looking at the manuscript edition, I've also made a flow chart. And what I basically want to highlight here is that we have a division of labor in the project that's quite marked up. The left and right, the green and left rectangle highlights the cultural heritage institutions. They provide facsimiles of the manuscripts related to Andersen's tales. The manuscripts are located in 12 different collections across Europe and in the US. I here highlighted the workflows going on at the Royal Library in Copenhagen, the main collection. And this workflow that I described, it's not as elaborate as the Swiss workflow, the Proto for digital editions that we just heard about. I mainly used it in order actually to explain to my colleagues in the library world what we do with their work once it leaves their green field and enters the DSE field, where we then enrich the data and add new data to it. Now, a flowchart can also help you to identify the steps where you want to try to optimize something, as in the Anglo-Irish 21st century project. We did try to use machine learning to speed up things in the transcription phase, but let's see if I can click it here. Yes. As you see on the left here, Andersen was in the habit of filling out an entire leaf of paper with his writing. He wanted both to save paper and then also to save time. And it was quite good for him. He tried to optimize his process, but it also meant that there's a lot of information to be derived. You can actually track his changes building this button, but it also means that it was very difficult to get an efficient HTR process going on. So in the end, after some experiments, we said, well, we had a volunteer transcribing, and instead of bringing transcribers in the loop, we just stuck to transcribing this in a standard word editor, and then moving over to TEI or to the Thai XML. And actually, the volunteer enjoyed very much working in what he used to work in. He's also turning 80, so that might be part of the equation. But again, it always depends on the details over here. The second thing I wanted to highlight is that TEI fits into this workflow here. And for me, the nice part was then really that I didn't have to set up the web server or the search box and all these things. So 90% of the web development had already been done by Wolfgang and Magdalena, including like coordination with the IIIF image server and so forth. I could then concentrate on the 10% that are needed in order to make the standard DSE into a genetic edition. And again, I worked together with Magdalena and the colleagues there at Gintech. My job was mainly then to explain and specify what genetic elements I wanted to add to the mix. So let me briefly go through the three elements that I added to the Andersen edition. And if you look here up on the left corner, you see a typical case of what happened when he had really a lot of editing going on. Once he had squeezed in his corrections between the lines, he would often have difficulties reading it himself. So he would write it down in clearer writing on a separate page of leaf of paper. He would cut that out, and then he would paste it on top of the original. So the new leaf of paper is in yellow marked here in the beta version. It was pasted on top of the white original, the heavily edited one. So that's where the copy, cut and paste icons come from in our word editor. Now, this was a bit challenging how to handle this in the DSE. Most of you know that the standard layout is a text column on the left and a facsimile window next to it on the right. In the beta version on the top left, I squeezed in these extra text layer in the middle, but the trouble was that I was soon running out of white space. So the solution here was to make the facsimiles into sort of a draggable pane window that you can then move around on the screen as you so please. You can open 1, 2, 3, whatever number of facsimiles you want and drag them around. And that will then, let's say, disentangle the layout. It will fit Andersen's work habits. Might be interesting for some other people who are in a similar situation. The second edition, I don't need to say too much. You can see it when you try it out, visit the front page, and you'll see that there's a fast access to the tale that you want to learn. Interested in the Little Mermaid, just type in the 3 first characters and kaboom, you get the title and a little cover image. And this is interesting for the reading editions, in particular for the broader audience. And again, Magdalena came up with a lovely solution. Here it's a third-party tool, Syncgrid, which works very well. The third and final development is still in the addition, like the extra added thing, is still in development. This deals with the synoptic display of variants, what Anna and Maria were talking about with the Germans of Henrik Bitterfeld. You could handle that in a comparable manner. This synoptic display of variants, the Variorum edition for the English speakers, it's a bit of a specialty in the Nordic countries. It's not only Chaucer that you have 80 different manuscripts for, it's also for the Norse manuscripts. And they handle the process here with a tool called Collate X. So you can also apply this to Andersen's number of the versions he was producing in manuscript as he was working his way towards the printed fairy tale. This solution here is not developed by Magdalena for once and the colleagues, but by the grand old man of Danish DSEs, Carsten Kunde. And I hope to add this one also to the Thai publisher version in a year or so. Now, the main point regarding these three building blocks here is that there can be, let's say, technically speaking, it's just a set of small JavaScript files. You can take them from the Andersen edition, it's going online, being published soon, the source code, and then you can add them to your mix in your own TEI publisher. That is, I believe, the true power of the community approach. Okay, and I'll give a presentation of this later this year in November, December for the members of the community. So I'll bring it back to the community, and in this way, incrementally, you will have a lot of building blocks that are needed in order to, let's say, customize your edition. So that was the social part of this community process, the social side of the equation. That we have meetups in the bi-monthly, I think, more or less, in the e-editiones. So it means that the word spreads around, that people are getting updated, and that might also be a worthwhile alternative to updating the guides. Of course, they always lag half a year behind the development. This is also an efficient way of spreading the word, having meetups and having a Slack channel and so forth. Apart from the social side, you of course then have the modeling, and this is where you ask Magdalena and Wolfgang, and they'll know it much more better than I do. Wolfgang likened this modular part of building a DSE to a Lego block. And as a Dane, of course, I was tempted to use that as my metaphor. So if we put it simply, you could say that a DSE is a bit like going to Legoland. There are different areas you can go. You can look at the ninjas, you can go with the dragons, and so forth. But if you break down each of these different types of DSE or Legoland, they have basically very similar building blocks. So this would be the basic approach to the task. And then how many types are there? Well, that, of course, then it's a matter of looking up in the catalog, going to the white book, and I should have added the guide, of course. So go to the Federal Republic of Germany, or to the Austrians, or to the Swiss. They're the masters in this approach, or ask Wolfgang. This would then give you a kind of idea of how to approach whatever is not already around. Okay, and Wolfgang can probably elaborate this. I mean, you mentioned the HTML templates, the technical side of this, I will definitely leave to you. Yes. In the final part, I could zoom out and then explain to you what went wrong in Scandinavia and the question of whether national infrastructures are the right place to approach this diverse, the very diverse subject matter of a DSE. But I think the Zoom peak will probably be setting in, and your stomach aches are getting ready for lunch. So before I go into this area, I thought maybe I'll just stop here and have some questions, and then we can see if we have time for the crime story. Okay, so that's basically where I'll pause and hear questions and see what is of interest. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Holger. Do we have any questions? I have a question for you, Holger.
Yeah.
You tantalizingly put the word WordPress on one of your slides, which we find we use it increasingly for some of our additions. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about WordPress and how you're using it.
Yes. I would say that it's more a question of saying what sort of content, what is the technical level of the editors. So while I am able to encode and program a bit, that's about where my limitations set in. And the other part I have to buy as a consultancy service, which works fine. I'm happy with that. But my colleagues here at the Institute, it's a bit like the Ibsen configuration. Once the X man or X woman leaves the Institute, what happens then with the website? Do you just archive it and say the end of the story? Or do you want to add new elements, maybe some elements that are not so text-based, but more image or videos or what have you not? And this is where the WordPress solution is a way of, let's say, making myself someone who can be expedited with. It's also the case with the Leaf virtual research environment. They include the WordPress. So I think it's not the question that you can't do it with an XSDB solution. It's more the question that who is around at the institution who is able to do it. And this is where I say the way we want to use this, the collective work of Andersen at this site, it's more, as in the Holger case, it's more of a broader edition, like the trickle-down effect, taking a scientific edition, a DSE, and then making it into a reading edition and adding some blog entries. So in that case, for this reason, and also because of the long-term support at the Institute, it's more robust to make it into WordPress. But you can still do it if you're willing to, let's say, marry yourself with the X technologies. I would advocate it, but I don't have a fixed position, so I have to take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. We have a question at the back.
Yes. A little running.
Oh, and sorry, if you can come up, to the microphone, I can hear you as well.
So greetings to colleagues from Scandinavia. I was also very much interested as I see there are like 4 different editions. So it's striking me like with the diversity of technologies that I saw there, which is kind of like a similar to Ibsen. So I'm wondering, is it part of what is wrong with Scandinavia? I don't know. That is maybe open for you to say. I'm also interested in how do you kind of evolve with these different solutions, and what is kind of motivation to keep them separate, or challenges to merge them in a single, at least, space technology, etc. And how and what is the impact of interconnecting them? Of course, it's the same purpose. So this is kind of, I guess, like a selfish question in a sense, because it is a question for us, but in other sense, I think it is really a big thing for a growing space of these kind of interconnected editions that should be presented to consumers as a single space.
Yes.
So let's hope stay in touch.
Yes. Let's say if we go from like four different editions into the space of leaving Odense, we have Odense down here, only the manuscript edition, and then looking at not the four Polish bards, but the Les Trois Grands Danoises, the three Great Danes, as you would say in the UK. You would have there are some major monumental editions on Søren Kierkegaard and the world famous inside Denmark writer or bard Grundtvig. I'll add the later pointer here because otherwise you'll just get lost here. We had a phase where the equivalent of the Universitätsbibliothek Zürich was trying to set up a national platform for the long-term sustainment. However, lots of things can go wrong, and that's why these guidebooks are necessary in order to explain in manners that are both intelligible for domain experts and for technologists. What do you mean when you want to make texts available for the long term? And what never was really clarified properly in this project, the national platform here, was are you doing an archive / corpus, or are you doing an edition? And there are two very different animals. So the programmers built an archive and the editors expected an edition. So if you have a mismatch like that, with an archive being yellow and editions being green, then expectations are just not being met, and you end up with disappointments. So there were some attempts at doing this, but they didn't really model it properly and say, what are we actually building for? And this is where you say we didn't exchange, we did exchange also frameworks, but if you then look at where I began working as an editor, we took over some very good Finnish solution, forked that, and then used that to publish. But we never updated it to the software that is now in the version 4, I believe. It's a very good solution. As I say, the Finns are marvelous at building this. And this means that this edition is not being updated. It still runs on the software that's from 2010. And then you end up basically just having something tinkered and tweaked, which is a good way of saving costs at the beginning. But it's also the perfect way of, if you just fork whatever is technologies around when you're doing the project and you don't try to collect matters together, at least on an institutional level, you just have as a programmer, you end up with, let's say, 850 DSEs to maintain. And this is the classical quest. They're doing a fine work, for instance, at the language associations, where they have now 6 DSEs, and they're doing a subset which is working fine for them. So if you're at an institutional level, you are going to want to maintain this. But at the national infrastructure level, of course, these are projects that run, as it's always project financing. So they just run for 5 years, and then they try to declare success. And there's not the organic growth that you have in the community approach. And I believe that if you want to have something that has this niche aspect, which is where DSEs are really at their best, often the niches are best found on a transnational level. So it's a classic EU approach. I would say the nation state is not the right level. Either you go local or regional, local institutions, or you go transnational. So I believe for an EU project, and that's why I'm excited for the ancient philology, what the solutions you are developing there in the hub, this is the right way to go. And at the moment, the PI in this project is linked into this conference that is going on. So that would be my plea, both to say, okay, look at what frameworks are actually being adopted, and you have to mind the numbers here. They're important, especially if you're from funder outside. You're not going to read not even the guidebook that you're doing in Zurich. You're just going to look at how many users do they have? Do they have proof of concept? And you have a couple of projects that are going on that do have proof of concept. Sorry for being the monologue phase now again, but it's important to note the numbers. And then, of course, the question is, what is the long-term aspect of this? Is it a center? Centers, they come and go. Is it an academy of sciences that stay for centuries? They're the most stable unit, if you ask me. It's not the university institute. It's the Academy of Sciences. And this is where it's, for me, interesting where e-editionis is going from open software solutions into having some sort of stability guaranteed by a library or here in Warsaw, an Academy of Sciences. Yeah.